This week's shiur is called No Strings Attached, the mystical connections between Tzitzit and the Spies. The Parashat that we have just read, Parashat Shelah, speaks about the episode of Moshe Rabbeinu choosing from the elite, from the leaders of the Jewish people, from the high-ranking spiritual giants of the Jewish people, one from each tribe. And their objective, their shlichut, was to go out and scout the land and report back to Moshe Rabbeinu. And at the end of the parasha, and we know what happened there, that they came back, 10 of them gave a negative report. They saw things that they, in the manner and the way that they wanted to see things. In other words, they, at some point in their mission, they began to look at the whole concept of conquering the land of Israel with a particular bias. In other words, they didn't want to enter the land of Israel. They were looking for pretexts. And they began to see things that they wanted to see. And if that's not bad enough, when they came back, not only did they report about what they seemingly saw in the land of Israel and how negative it is, they gave an opinion. And they said, we cannot possibly conquer, we cannot possibly go to the land, our children will be totally lost there, it's not for us. This was, of course, a grave error. And we've discussed on previous occasions exactly what the perspective is. And I'm not going to delve too much into that aspect of it because we've discussed it a few times before in our other shiurim. However, I do want to point out towards the latter part of the shiur the connection between the episode of the spies and the end of the parasha, which is the portion that commands us concerning the tzitzit, the talit that we wear, the tzitzit that we wear, the fringes that we wear. This commandment that we are commanded to wear, to attach tassels, tzitzit, on our four-cornered garments. What is the significance of the four corners? And what is the significance of the tassels that we attach? And what is the function of it? In this portion, it clearly says that in order that you will remember all of the mitzvot of Hashem, the function of tzitzit is in order to remember all of the commandments, a garment that reminds us. The question is, why can't we wear a badge or like a pocket watch that, from time to time you take out and you look at it and it reminds you, it's got this little built-in alarm and it calls out, don't forget the mitzvot, don't forget Hashem. Why is it that we must wear a garment that is external? Maybe we should eat something, like some sort of vitamin, or they have certain herbs that enhances memory. What is the function of this tzitzit? The Kabbalists teach us, Tlat kishrin mitkashrin da beda. There are three knots that are intertwined, and they are Yisrael, Oraita, v'Kudsha Birichu. The Jewish people, the Torah, and the Almighty. They are three things that are intertwined one with the other and create a solid bond, like if you were to take 3 pieces of rope and you were to attach them. By attaching them with 3 knots, they become a circle. They become a circle, meaning to say that there are eternally, circle is a symbol of eternity, they are eternally bound up. The reason why this is so is because the Jewish people, their neshama, their soul, are bound with God, are a part of God. The Torah is the wisdom of God. The Jewish people are called in the Torah, B'ni Bechori Israel, my firstborn child. Banim atem l'Hashem Elokechem, you are children to the Lord your God. And just as a child emanates from the essence, from the thought process of a parent, so too the Jewish people stem and are rooted in the thought, in the innermost part of God. And this will be evident in another verse that we will soon quote. Oraita, the Kabbalists teach us, Oraita mechochma nafket. The Torah comes from the wisdom of God. So here we have the Jewish people come from the wisdom of God, and the Torah comes from the wisdom of God, and both of them are attached to God. So they are interrelated. They are, so to speak, on the same frequency. Therefore, it does not come as a shock to us that in fact, before a neshama is born to this world, it knows, or as is the famous expression, it is taught the whole Torah. But I believe since it's of the same frequency, it knows the whole Torah. It's attuned to the whole Torah. And then, when it is born, it forgets, so to speak, what it was taught, or it forgets the whole Torah. It has to relearn. If it has to learn, what's the purpose of teaching it? In the first instance, because it's engraved on the soul. And as I mentioned before, I personally believe that it's not so much that it was taught it, more than it knew it, if you know what I mean. It's on the same frequency. It automatically relates to the Torah because it's rooted in the same level as the Torah itself, the wisdom of God. And then it enters a body. And then it forgets everything. And it's now got the process, must go through the process of relearning and reattaching itself to Hashem. Because as it says in the Torah, chapter 2, in Bereshit, chapter 2, verse 6 or 7, Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et ha'adam afar min ha'adama vayipach ba'apav nishmat hayim. And God formed man, dust from the earth, and he blew within his nostril the breath of life. There are two components here. He shaped man from the dust of the earth, like one molds something. One takes dust, one takes clay, and molds a vessel, like one would mold a brick, so to speak, shapes it, forms it, in order to create a building block, or a vessel. And then he blew within him the breath of life. The way Hashem created Adam, man, is totally different from the way he created all of the creatures, even the celestial beings, even the angels, the highest angels. There it was a statement. God, so to speak, created the whole world, even the highest worlds, with Vayomer Hashem. Hashem said, Vayomer Elokim. Let there be this and let there be that. With speech. Speech is an external part of us. It expresses something internal, but it is an external part of us. When God created man, he created within him, he created him with a different manner altogether. Vayipach ba'apav nishmat hayim. He blew within him the breath of life. Why was man created differently? Why did not God say, let there be man, and there was man? Why does it use the expression, Vayipach ba'apav nishmat hayim? He blew within him the nostrils, the breath of life. It says in the Zohar, Man danafah mitochi anafah. Mitochiyuto upenimiyuto. He who blows, blows from his innards. Blowing is an expression that something comes deep within you, as opposed to speech. When you blow a balloon for your children, which I hate to do, it knocks me out. It takes so much energy, comes from the insides. This is man. For man has two parts, two components. One that was fashioned and formed, like all creatures, the body, and one that comes from the innards of God. So the body and the soul. And the body presents a very deep and great challenge to the neshama, so to speak, to relearn, to re-identify with its source, because it conceals everything. Not only does it conceal everything, because the body has a very healthy ego and rarely thinks where it comes from, its spiritual source, that it was created. It's not continually aware of this as the angels are, or the celestial beings, or the heavenly bodies. And B, it's physical. It tends towards physical things, as physical desires, pleasures, and drives. And C, it is coupled with an animalistic soul, with a Yetzer Hara, with an evil inclination, that its sole objective is to tempt him to reveal the inner reservoir of spiritual strength that we have. That is a formidable task that the neshama now has in front of it. The Sefer HaChinuch writes, Sefer HaChinuch is one of those books that codifies the mitzvot, numbers them, and based upon the Parashat though, and explains to us what they are and their fundamental principles. And he says, what is the fundamental principle of the Tzitzit? He says there are two components to the Tzitzit. Ultimately, the tzitzit, true, it's the fringes that are attached to a garment, but it's the fringes ultimately that remind us. These fringes, in biblical times, have two components to them. One of them is white, two colors. One of them is white, and one of it is this turquoise type, deep, dark blue, a royal, deep, dark blue. The dark blue one is the coil, is the string that acts as the coil and wraps around all of the other strings. He says that the white represents the body. For white is a neutral color. It awaits to receive a color. Lavan. Lavan, one can suggest, shares the same root as levenim. Building blocks. Bricks. You form a brick. In Egypt, their service was behomer ubelevenim. Behomer, with the clay, but Homer also means physicality. In Egypt, they had to toil through, they had to work through the materialism of the world. The levanim, the bricks that they had to, libun hilchata, the sages say, they had to refine things. They had to create bricks and shape them. White is a color that awaits to be formed, like the clay of man, like the earth of man that God created man. God shaped it, gave it a form, blew within it the breath of life. And then the color white also represents or is connected to the body, if I might suggest. For white is the color that the Kabbalists refer to as the attribute, this is symbolic of the attribute of God's, of kindness. or love. In our case, if I may suggest, a person loves himself. Achol peshaim techase ahava. Our natural love for ourselves covers all of our defects, our faults. Lavan, the father-in-law of Yaakov, was known to be an unbelievable liar. Everything about him was falsehood. The very word Lavan, he was called Lavan, white. It's what a beautiful name for someone who's so black. Really, he was black. Everything he did was black, but he whitewashed everything. He painted everything with a whitewash. Everything is good. The body's natural tendency is to whitewash everything, to justify everything. Even though that we can very easily come to the awareness that we have a mission, we have an objective, and we shouldn't get lost. We shouldn't get carried away in this world. Surely we were created for a purpose and a mission. Yet when we do things wrong, how do we allow ourselves the liberty of doing things wrong? Because we justify things, we whitewash things. So it's natural that the white and the tzitzit is a symbol of the body. Tchelet, the blue, is a symbol of the soul. Why? Because the sages say, what is so different? What is so unique of the color blue? Because the color blue reminds us of the sea, which reminds us of the sky, which reminds us of the divine throne, of which the soul comes from that level. One can ask the question, why don't the sages say clearly, blue, well, that's the color that's symbolic of the divine throne. Why does it say it's a color that reminds us of the sea, and the sea reminds us of the sky, and the sky reminds us of the divine throne? Cut the chase, go straight to the divine throne. If I may suggest, there is nothing more vast than the sea. I took my son to the gap the other day, while the little ones were frolicking in the sand with my wife. I took him to see the gap. The water is so vast, and the waves were crashing against the rocks, so powerful. I think the two most vast component of this world is the sea and the sky. In fact, the majority of the earth is water. Nothing more vast, more deep, more powerful than the sea, and nothing as vast as the sky, the heavens. So perhaps it's an indication to show us, you want to understand just a little smidgen of what the divine throne is. You ponder the sea and the sky, see the vastness of it. You see how minuscule you are, how nothing you are. You stand in front of a sea, you see how nothing you are. You look at the sky, the vast of the sky, you see, from there to here, what am I? That gives us a little bit of a humility before we even dare to think about the divine throne. So the sages don't want you to go cut the chase and go ponder about the divine throne straight away. First of all, look at the sea. Look at yourself in reference to the sea. And if the sea is not vast enough to give you a little bit of humility, then look at the sky. That'll for sure give you a little bit of humility. Then you can truly receive what the message of the divine throne is. That's where the neshama comes from. Very powerful, very holy. Sublime. And they come together. And they come together in the form not only of the body and soul, but are symbolized and are enshrined in the mitzvah of tzitzit, the white and the blue. And what is man's objective? That the blue, which represents the soul, should always be dominating. How? Because we take the blue and we coil it around like we do with tefillin, we coil it around our hand, showing that the symbol of what tefillin is, that we control, we subdue the hand, the material world. Similar to Tzitzit, we take the blue, which is a symbol of the soul, of spirituality, of the divine throne, and we coil it around the white, which represents the body, to show mastery that the soul has and should exercise its mastery over the body. And it is supreme. The body is secondary. It's an important tool, but must always be secondary to the soul, not the other way around. Must be subservient to the soul, or not the other way around. The soul must schlep the body and uplift the body to the highest of heights, and not that the body schleps the soul to the lowest depths. And we put it on a garment that has 4 corners, because the body is a composite of 4 elements. Of earth, which scientists call minerals, of water, which is called liquid, of air, which is called gas, of fire, which is called energy. The body is a composite of these 4 things. We have heat, we have vapor, breath, we have liquid, and we have warmth and energy and electricity within us. So this body that really is a representative of the whole world, which has these 4 components, but we are the epoch, the highest of the whole creation, is to be the symbol that spirituality controls and uplifts it. And that we must remember, man tiskor, we must remember. Uritemoto, you look at it, look at the tzitzit, and you remember Hashem. And you remember, Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am the Lord your God. Uschartem et kol mitzvot Hashem, you shall remember all of the mitzvot. Why is it so important to remember all of the mitzvot? 2 fundamental reasons I want to present today. 1, as is brought down in the book called Panim Yafot by a very great rabbi, one of the students of the Holy Maggid of Mezrich. His name was Rabbi Pinchas Horowitz. He was the chief rabbi of Frankfurt. And he wrote 2 famous works, the Hafla'ah and Panim Yafot. And there he writes as follows: Yadua, and this is based upon the Zohar HaKadosh, the Holy Zohar, which Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wrote. And he writes as follows: Yadua, it is known, Sheyesh ba'adam shlosha helkei nefesh. We have 3 parts to our soul. Shekedushatam zo lemala mizo, of which its uniqueness and spirituality is one higher than the other. Behem, and they are, as we have enumerated many times, nefesh, ruach, neshama, spirit, breath. Actually, it should be the other way around. It should be nefesh, soul, ruach, spirit, neshama, breath. Ulam tzrichimanu lada'at. However, we must know, shelo kol adam zoche lekabel et shloshet halakim halalu. Not every single person merits to be the recipient of all these 3. There are 2 other components to the soul that are way above and beyond, which we've discussed other times and we're not discussing tonight. But the 3 that are possibly or potentially enclosed within the body are these 3, and minimally it's nefesh, the soul. Potentially it's ruach, the spirit, and even higher than that, the neshama, the breath. Vezot, and this is because kivan shehadavar talui b'madregato shel ha'adam ba'avodat Hashem, because this is solely dependent upon a person's level in his service of God, whether he is fitting to receive all those three parts of the soul in his body. Kemuvuar bezohar HaKadosh, as it says in the Holy Zohar, and is as follows. Tahazi, come and see. Bar nash kadit yalid, when a person is born, yehavin le nafsha, he is granted the nefesh, the soul. Zacha, if he merits, yehavin le ruha, they grant him the spirit. Zacha yatir, if he merited even more, yehavin le neshmata, he will then merit the breath or the highest part of the soul called neshama. And when a person merits to receive the third, the highest part of our soul called neshama, Omer HaZohar HaKadosh, the Holy Zohar says as follows: As yeshlo shmira miyuchedet, a person has a very special, so to speak, protection. V'siyua milamala, and assistance, divine assistance from above, la'avod et Hashem kara'ui, in order to serve God properly, in order that the soul will dominate over the material, the body. In order that the soul will never forget its objective and why it was planted in this world. In order that the soul remembers what it was taught before it came down to this world. About, he says, however, ka'asher halila hoteh hadam, however, God forbid when a person may sin. Az mistaleket mimeno aneshama. Then, God forbid, the soul, the highest part, is taken from him. Is removed from him. He still lives. He still has that part of his of the spirit that enables him to live and even feel spirituality, but not such a degree. That's why you find people who are very spiritually insensitive, because they've gone over and lived their lives in such a manner of darkness and concealment, and have associated themselves with so much negativity and darkness that they become spiritually insensitive. They're not able to feel. And the reason is, as the Zohar says, because their part of the neshama has been taken away from them. And as a result of which, and at that point, you then begin to lose your divine protection. When we say divine protection, we're not talking about the tax office or one of those mad hooligan drivers. We're talking about spiritual protection from the forces of negativity that pull us down, the ability to overcome and overpower the materialism of the world and the evil inclination and the enticement and the impulses of the world. That's what we're talking about. Kemuvuar bezohar HaKadosh, as it says in the Holy Zohar, lo zacha velo ata li'tka'a. If a person did not merit, he will not come to be refined and purified. And then, Trendargin, Petahin, De'inun Nefesh, Veruach Ba. And he's left with two levels, and that is the soul and the spirit. Aval Nishmata Kadisha let be. However, he has lost, he does not have anymore, he has forfeited the holy soul, the holy Neshama, the breath. V'siyua de le'ela e'adin minei, and the divine above protection is taken away from him. So what do we learn from here? That God forbid, when a person sins, a person who doesn't sin, who serves God properly, merits to be embodied within him, to be the reciprocal of the three parts of the soul. God forbid if a person sins, he loses the higher part of the soul, and with that he loses the divine, so to speak, assistance or protection from above. And God forbid if a person sins very severe sins, mistaleket mimeno gam haruach, he loses then not only the neshama, but he loses the spirit as well. The ruach is only left with nefesh, just the basic ingredient that keeps him alive. Kedivrei Hazor, as it says, Kad barana she'im mechuyev bechuvin umitgabrin mishmat hayim istalkat min gufa v'nefesh ishta'ira taman. When a person sins, the soul of life is removed from him, and all he is left with is the Spirit of God is removed from him, and all he's left with is the nefesh, the life source, and that's it. This is what the Talmud tells us in Masechet Shabbat. It says in the Torah that man was created in the image of God. God doesn't have a physical image. It means the soul, the neshama. That's the image of God. It's very powerfully spiritual. It is so powerfully spiritual that the Talmud Masechet Shabbat tells us that this automatically imbues the animal kingdom with fear of man. That's why we see that the righteous are not fearful. There's a famous story told about one of my ancestors, Rabbi Ephraim Ankawa, who came to a city. I think it was in Talmasan. And everybody was hiding, and he didn't know why everybody was hiding. They told him, quick, hide, hide, hide. And he said, why? He said, because the lion of the king escaped from the palace, from the royal gardens. And he's hungry, and you know the rest. And he had no fear. And a while later, you see him holding a snake, and the snake is in the mouth of the lion, and he's sitting on the lion, and he's leading the lion to the palace of the king. I have a book from him at home of where it says the whole story, and there is a picture of it's a famous story. You find it in Talks and Tales as well, and the picture of the whole story. It's a famous story. This is Rabbi Ephraim Ankawa. He was the son of Rabbi Israel El Nekave. The name was shortened when they got to Morocco. He was one of the Rishonim, one of the early authorities. Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, survived. This happens of tzaddikim because tzaddikim have the image of God upon them. The animals naturally fear them. But when that image of God is taken away, then what are you left with? You're left with one animal and another animal. And whoever is strongest, the fittest survive. But when a person behaves godly, he has the neshama, he has the image of God upon him. He has the stamp of the name of God upon him. They automatically fear. Therefore, because God forbid there is a possibility that man may sin, and if God forbid a person may sin, he will then remove parts of the soul from him, and then will remove the divine protection, not only from the animal kingdom, but spiritually. A person will become spiritually insensitive and will open himself up to the impulses of the evil inclination. Hashem commanded the mitzvah of Tzitzit, that you look upon them, and you will remember, and you will fulfill all of the mitzvot. A regular reminder that you must remember the mitzvot, because God forbid if you do not remember them. If you remember the mitzvot and act upon them and serve God properly, you will merit all parts of the soul. If God forbid no, you should not follow the dictates of your eyes and your hearts. God forbid. God forbid if you do follow the dictates of your heart and your eyes, then there's a possibility that parts of the soul will be, or at least levels of the parts of the soul will be diminished from you. That's what it says in the Zohar HaKadosh. And thus we have this mitzvah of tzitzit as a constant reminder. So the question is, why tzitzit? Let's have a reminder. Let's have a badge. Let's wear a badge. The remembrance, Zachor, you know the Zachor badge? You know, people have the Zachor badge to remember the Holocaust. You have the Zachor Mitzvot badge. Or whatever it is. Why tzitzit? So one, already we have an answer, because the tzitzit, The white is a symbol of the body, and the blue is a symbol of the soul, as the Sefer HaChinuch wrote, and as we mentioned. And that our objective is to be able to twine the blue around, to subjugate the white, the body, to the soul. However, we can go a little bit deeper than that. Tzitzit reminds us not to lose our way, and that the soul must continually strengthen itself over the body. We have two aspects to a human being. We have food that enters the body, liquid that enters the body, oxygen that enters the body, and another important ingredient, we have clothes that surround the body. Food enters, clothes surround, encompasses the body. Tzitzit is a garment, and thus a garment surrounds it, encompasses the body. It transcends, so to speak, the body. It is a symbol that if we are truly, it is a reminder that if we are truly to serve God and be the recipient of the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama, all aspects of the soul, we must transcend the body. We must go beyond the limitations of the body. Notice it says in the Parashat of the Tzitzit, the portion of Tzitzit, it speaks about the going out of Egypt. What's the connection between going out of Egypt? I beg your pardon, in the Shema. The Shema that we read, the portion of Tzitzit is part of the reading of the Shema. And in the reading of the Shema, we recite the going out of Egypt. What's the connection? So the Gemara tells us that there are 5 important things that connect the parasha of Tzitzit to the recitation of the Shema, because the recitation of the Shema is a unification of God. Really, it's got nothing much to do with Tzitzit. Tzitzit is a separate concept. We don't have much time, so I don't want to speak too much about it. But I want to go the other way around. What's the connection of going out of Egypt that is coupled with the Tzitzit? Very simple. In order to fulfill all of the mitzvot, we must go out of our own personal Egypt. Egypt, Mitzrayim. The root of Mitzrayim is tsar, a very narrow place. Very narrow place. The body confines the soul, makes it very narrow, pushes it against the wall. You're not going anywhere, mate. You're staying right here, and this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going. Don't bother me, and don't tell me about this, and don't tell me about tefillin, and don't tell me about kosher, and don't be a conscience. I don't want to have a conscience. I don't want to have a guilty conscience. Stay quiet. Tsar. It wants to limit the effect of the soul. That's the body. That's Mitzrayim. That's Egypt. Egypt is not only a physical place, it's a spiritual concept. The exile of Egypt is a spiritual concept that still exists. And that is the limitation of self, the limitation of the soul. The body confines it, wants to limit its scope, doesn't want it to expand and rule over the body. Comes the mitzvah of Tzitzit and tells us it's a garment, it's external, it transcends the body to tell us that if we are truly to serve God, if we are truly to keep all of the mitzvot, we must transcend the body. And incidentally, the word tzitzit comes from the word metzitz mina harakim, to peek. To get a little glimpse. Tzitzit gives us a glimpse into the soul. Makes an opening in the body for the soul to escape, so to speak. Little opening. When there's a little opening, there's room for growth and development. Tzitzit makes this opening.
Are we transcending the body or the soul?
I beg your pardon?
Are we transcending the body or the soul?
We must transcend the body. in order for the soul to be able to captivate or to rule or to govern the body, we must go beyond our selfishness. We must go beyond our desires. We must go beyond our comfort zone, what we want, what we wish. Because if a person will follow his whole life the material and the crass world, then the soul will never have an expression. Comes Tzitzit and tells us, gives us an opening to the soul, gives us a glimpse to the soul the way it was before it entered the body, gives us a glimpse to the soul to what it knew before it entered the body, it reminds us of our mission, of how holy and powerful the soul is. It reminds us that the soul is as vast as the sea, which is less vast than the sky. And if we can imagine how vast the sky is, then we can imagine how vast the glory of God is, the throne of God is. That's why blue is a royal color. And you can imagine how vast, how powerful, and how refreshing the soul is. Don't ignore it. Tzitzit, metzitz, allows for a little opening to peek, to see through it all. It's interesting to note that the Kohen Gadol wore some white garments, but he also wore tchelet garment, this royal blue garment, this dark blue. And the most holiest part was a tzitz, I don't know how it's called in English, how they translate it in English. Like a little thing over here, on top of blue. It was on top, sitting on a blue piece of material, the same color as Tchelet, the same color as the Tzitzit. And there it says, Kodesh la Hashem. Totally sanctified to Hashem. It's like a crown that he was wearing, total for Hashem. Signifies the highest point. So the Tzitzit reminds us to go beyond and higher than the self, higher than ourselves. Tzitzit. Lehatzitz, to look through. Metzitz min harakim, peeking through the crevices. Open up a little bit to allow the soul to go through, to penetrate. Tchelet, why tchelet? So we learned the tchelet is the blue. Why tchelet? Why is it called tchelet? Petil techelet, you should put petil techelet on the garment. So tchelet, we said blue because it reminds us of the sea, that reminds us of the sky, that reminds us of the throne. But the word tchelet is very special in itself. Tchelet is tichle. Nichsefa vekam kalta nafshi, David HaMelech says, my soul pines for you. My soul wants to cleave to you, wants to go out of itself. Kalta nafshi, it wants to expire. Wants to just leave the body and expire and cleave to you. The word chelet shares the same root as that, to expire, to totally be nullified before God. And that's what the soul wants. And the objective of the soul is to harness the body. And not only the body, the material world, the white, its natural color. Give it a shape, give it a color, give it form, give it some spiritual substance. This is the mitzvah of Tzitzit. And when you look around, don't just look at the physical world. Peek something beyond, see something beyond the physical and the material. And the comfortable furniture, and the this, and the beautiful clothing, and all of that stuff. You've got to peek beyond that. That's what Tzitzit does. It allows us to peek beyond that. Uplift ourselves beyond the physical and the material. And this comes to rectify the sin of the meraglim, of the spies. And as I briefly mentioned in the beginning, the spies were misled by their eyes, by what they saw, and by their heart, really what they wanted. What they saw what they wanted to see. Because really, deep down, they didn't want to go to the land of Israel. Either because they felt that it'd be too difficult for them to take the spirituality that they received from Moshe Rabbeinu, from God, the Torah, and now harness it to the physical world. That's a formidable task. And we've spoke about this in previous shurim, so I don't want to elaborate too much. But for those who may not have been here, or as a refresher, here we are now. We're in the desert. We've just received the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of teacher of all, is our teacher. We receive the man from God. We've got water. There's no hassles, there's no issues, and all we are doing now is developing spiritually. And now we're going to conquer the land. We have to deal with our people around us. The influence around is not very nice at all. What's going to be with our children? Where are they going to go? They're going to start going to the discos. They're going to start going to the movies. What for? Stay in the desert with Moshe Rabbeinu, get the man, no worries. They're going to start having to go to universities, and going to have to mingle with this one, and mingle with that one. And then they're going to have to go to work. And how many hours we spend on work. And what about all the trials and tribulations there? Will they cheat? Will they lie? Will they steal? And how many hours already they're going to spend on serving God? So they looked around and they saw what they wanted to see. Their intentions were noble. Their intentions were noble. Interesting. Interesting that in the Parashat of Tzitzit it says, "V'lo taturu acharei levavechem v'acharei einechem." You shall not follow the dictates of your eyes and your heart. Heart here is spelled levavchem with two bets. In the first part of Shema it says, V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha, with all of your heart. There it's also written with two bet. The Gemara in Masechet Berachot tells us, why is it written with two bet? Because you got to love God with every fiber of your being. With both parts of your heart. We have a part of our heart that wants spirituality. We have a part of our heart that wants physicality. Both part of the heart has to love Hashem. So too over here, but in a different manner, the exact opposite. When we serve Hashem, we are not to be led astray by both part of our heart. Not only our physical part of our heart that desires physical things, but even the spiritual side. In other words, our desires must be nothing other than the will of God Himself. Even when our eyes and even when our mind and even when my heart tends to some spiritual idea or opinion, that is also no good. Because look at the spies. Their intentions were for the sake of heaven. But they caused a great massive sin. They caused a delay. The intention of God is to take the tchelet, the blue, and wrap it around the white. The intention of God is that we engage in the physical and control it and subdue it and uplift it and elevate it towards godliness. That's the intention of God. And that is where they erred. Why in the first place does God put a body a soul in a body? If the intention was as the Meraglim's intention were, then leave the soul without a body. Don't even enter this world. God willed that. But God wills also that the chelet, that the blue will wrap around the white and control and subdue it and uplift it and elevate it. So even if our heart strays, not only for bad things, that's for sure no good. But even if it strays for good things, but if it's not the will of God, it's no good. Who gave you permission to give an opinion? You were meant to go and report what you saw, and that's it, not give an opinion. They went around, and they went, and they got people all scared and frightened. They talked to this one, talked to that one. This is what we saw, and man, who gave you an opinion? Come to Moshe Rabbeinu and give and tell us what you saw. No, they didn't do that. They went the whole night, and they stirred trouble. because that was what they wanted. And even if what you wanted has a spiritual connotation to it, a spiritual tilt to it, also no good. Our motivation must be solely and purely for the sake of heaven. And that's why it says, you shall not follow the dictates of your heart with both part of your hearts. Whether the good part of the heart, whether the bad part of the heart, and even the good part of the heart. Our motivation should be tchelet. Tchelet means, like David HaMelech says, nichsefa v'gam kalta nafshi, that my whole soul pines and thirsts for you, wants to expire for you. That's all it wants. And that's what the mitzvah of tzitzit is all about. And then, when we are aware of what the tzitzit is and how it rectifies the sin of the 12 tribes, it gives us a glimpse into something beyond, something that transcends the body, something that transcends the limitation of body and the narrowness of the body. And that's why the meraglim are called meraglim. These were great, lofty people, as the Torah itself attests to. When they left, the ksherim hayu, they were noble people. They were kosher Jews. They were lofty Jews. Somewhere along the way, they started to have doubts. And even though their intention was the sake of heaven, meraglim, the word meraglim has the root word regel, which means foot. Instead of being the leaders and the heads, they became the lowest part. Because they gave their own opinion. Tzitzit comes to rectify all of that. Tzitzit says, lo taturu. Don't just go and follow what you see, even if it has a spiritual tilt to it. Be motivated solely to cleave to Hashem. And that's what tzitzit is all about. And if we remind ourselves of tzitzit, we wear tzitzit, we look upon tzitzit, we recall what tzitzit is all about regularly, then it guards us from, God forbid, losing the different parts of the soul, and God forbid not to forfeit the protection that Hashem has given us. And for this reason, if you have a look at the tzitzit, it has on each corner has 8 strings. 8 times 4 equals 32. 32 spells the Hebrew word for lev, heart. The tzitzit is to remind us, when we look at the tzitzit, just like, God forbid, we can look at things that are not good, and then this allows the heart to stray. When we look at good things, then it allows the heart to be connected to what the tzitzit represents. The heart now begins to have a peak into something spiritual, something lofty, something that transcends. And that is why we don't wear a pin. That is why we don't put something in our pocket that reminds us of mitzvot. We wear a garment that transcends. And it's a garment that extends itself out like a branch, like have a look, I don't know whether you ever saw the way a what do you call it, grows? A vine, and from the vine grows the grapes, and the grapes extend outwards. The tzitzit, the mitzvah of tzitzit, must extend outwards to the 4 corners of the world, which represents the 4 elements.
So you don't tuck it in, keep it hanging.
Well, there are different customs exactly how we do. The custom is that we don't put it in our pants, but that it's covered from the outside. But most definitely we wear the talit in our prayers. We look upon it regularly. We must look upon the tzitzit regularly from time to time to remind us. And our prayers, most definitely, we do it to remind us. There's a great holiness that comes from the tzitzit. And when we look upon it, it imbues us with the awe and the fear of God.
So where's the blue today, Rabbi?
Unfortunately, we no longer have the blue because we are uncertain from for where this dye comes from, for which fish it comes from. And it says in the book of Sfat Emet that this is an indication of really how low our generation is. Nonetheless, in Pri Megadim, in one of the books of Halakha, he writes that some have the custom of having dark lines on the talit as a reminder, as a remembrance of that blue, at least as a remembrance of that blue. So that's why some have the custom of having these lines there.